Now here we have some global character settings. First of all is a quality drop-down menu. In eco mode, it can still sound quite pleasing, but it will use less CPU. And then there's a mid CPU usage quality setting, and high, which will ostensibly use the most CPU and give the most theoretically accurate response. Now we can change the size of the acoustic space we're attempting to represent with this reverb via the size dial. And we can either exaggerate or eliminate the stereo response. So we can create the sense of a narrower or wider space, depending on what we're going for. In this case, I want it really big, so I've got the size, huge, maximum, stereo mount, maximum. I'm going to remove some of the low frequencies on the output. So there's a difference between these two filters. This is filtering the incoming signal before any reverb is applied. So we've already removed some low frequencies there. What we're dealing with here is the diffusion network, the actual decay tail of the reverb. And I want to remove some low frequencies that have been generated in that. So I'll enable this low filter. It's a little steep there, but... And again, we can deactivate these if we want to free up more CPU, but there's a high pass filter with Q band and frequency settings here, and they're both represented by a corresponding ball in the graph here. So the decay time determines how long it takes for the decay tail to get down to minus 60 decibels of its initial volume. So that's almost like an infinite decay at 60 seconds. I think I'll put it around 12 seconds or so. So considerably longer and bigger sounding than the 5 seconds we started with. Now we have a freeze button, which can be mapped to a key or MIDI controller. And it's just going to grab the reverb signal at the time you hit it and freeze that and continue playing it. Now if I hit the cut button, it will no longer receive incoming reverb. Whereas if the cut is disabled, each new chord stab being fed to it adds to the result. Now if I stop sending the chord stab to it and stop the chord stab completely, the freeze will continue until I disable it. And then the reverb begins to die out normally. Now with a flat mode, the freeze ignores the EQ. But I think in most cases, for myself anyway, I would not want to ignore the EQ on the freeze. I may, however, typically want to cut the continuing input signal. So finally, on the output stage, we have a dedicated chorus, which can be useful for adding a certain sheen to the decay. Bit of modulation there. Make it a little more subtle. Then we have a density control. This is how full or dense the diffusion network or decay tail is. At higher settings, giving a thicker sort of result with more low mid-range. So somewhere in the middle typically works for me. Adjust it to taste as you like. Whereas the scale changes the shape of the diffusion network bounce back with higher scale amounts, giving sort of a darker feeling. And lower scale settings being a little brighter. Finally, along with the standard dry-wet balance here, we've got two different volume amounts, one for the early reflections, controlled by the pre-delay, and one for the diffusion network. So in this case, I've got the early reflections turned all the way up, and the diffusion turned all the way down. And now I'll give you a taste of the opposite. So depending on what you're going for, you could adjust as needed.